one of the areas of science that you have spent time researching is neuroscience. And as you know, many neuroscientists have constantly claimed that the human beings do not have a soul. And this seems to be incompatible with the Christian teaching. So how then would you make the case that we humans are more than our brains without violating scientific findings?
This is another good question. 2 years ago, I was invited to deliver a lecture at the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. This is the main scientific research center in the United States government, and they have thousands of scientists. Well, I went and spoke to a large gathering of research biologists, neuroscientists, and so on. And I made the claim that when it comes to discovering how the soul and its states of consciousness, like thoughts and memories and beliefs and so on, when it comes to how the soul interacts and depends on the brain, and how the brain depends on the soul, neuroscience is wonderful. But when it comes to questions about what is consciousness and what is it that possesses consciousness, neuroscience has absolutely nothing to say about the subject. You know what happened? I got no pushback on that. None of the neuroscientists in that audience had anything to say against my claim, and here's why. I have to get your listeners to first of all understand what it means for two theories to be empirically equivalent. That just means that these two theories imply exactly the same observational data. If that's the case, then you can't appeal to empirical observations to decide which theory is true, because both theories are compatible with the same observation. Now, there are a certain group of neurons in the brain, those are just cells in the brain, called mirror neurons. And we've discovered that if they're damaged, a person cannot feel empathy. Now, there are three theories that can explain that fact. One of them is physicalism, which says that a feeling of empathy is the same thing as mirror neurons firing. So when mirror neurons can't fire, there's no empathy because they're just the same thing. The second view is called property dualism, and that says, no. A feeling of empathy is an immaterial state of consciousness that is located in the brain, but to feel empathy, the brain has to be functioning properly. The third theory is no, the feeling of empathy is an immaterial conscious state. You're right about that, but it is possessed by the soul. A firing of mirror neurons is a brain state possessed by the brain, but while the soul is in the body, there are certain things that it cannot have happen unless the brain is working. And so if mirror neurons won't fire, the soul is unable to produce a feeling of empathy that it contains. Now listen, all three of those theories are compatible with exactly the same neuroscientific empirical data. And so neuroscience cannot tell us which of those three theories is true. To answer the question as to which is true requires philosophy and theology. And in my book, I show the best arguments show that consciousness is immaterial and the soul is what possesses consciousness. Though just as when I'm in a car and I'm driving around, I depend on the car working. If it breaks down, I can't get somewhere, but that doesn't prove I'm the car. In the same way, while I'm in my body, if my brain breaks down, I can't do certain things in my soul, like feel empathy, But that just shows a dependency relationship, not that consciousness is the same thing as the brain state or that there's no soul. Neuroscience is silent on the nature of consciousness and the nature of the thing that has it.
Well, related to the same topic, I'm aware that you also have shown interest exploring what are called near-death experiences, or perhaps, as I've heard you once said, better be called after-death experiences. Do you think they are authentic first? And if so, how do these after-death experiences inform us about the soul and the spiritual world?
Well, there's no question that near-death experiences are real. There are 200 to 300 million that have happened worldwide. In the United States, 12 to 14 million people have had an after-death experience in the last 30 years. Now, these have been researched very carefully by PhD researchers at the University of Connecticut and other major schools, and they have discovered that in many of these experiences, the people come to learn things that they could not have known if it were simply oxygen deprivation to the brain or something else. For example, some people are able to report what was happening 2 rooms down the hall, and the doctors went and verified what happened, and this is in the medical record. One Dutch cardiologist, Pim van Lommel, said that his research into people who died through a heart attack and were revived 20 or 30 minutes later were able to describe the resuscitation techniques so accurately that they could actually be used to train doctors about how to resuscitate people with a heart attack. But when he studied people who died of a heart attack but did not report a near-death experience, and he asked them to try to explain what happened to resuscitate them, they all got it wrong. They described things they saw on television and things like that. So the proof is that people come to learn things that are now in the medical records and were verified by eyewitnesses that they could not have known if they did not have a real near-death experience. Now, since these things are real, this is a real problem for naturalistic atheists, because what it proves is that I am not my body, that I depend upon my body to see and hear while I'm in my body. My eyes are poked out, I can no longer see. But when I'm outside of my body, I can see and hear without a brain or eyeballs. What that shows is that life after death is real, and that I am not my soul, and that is I'm not my body, and that's a real problem. By the way, a book by John Burke called Imagine Heaven shows that 95% of these near-death experiences are consistent with the Bible. A lot of people think that they're not consistent with the Bible, and he shows that in fact they are. There's about 5% that are kind of goofy and way out there and are probably not credible, but that these are harmonizable with Scripture.